Hey guys, Kakarot197 again with another question of the week. And considering all of the comments that I got on the previous question of the week concerning that crashed Pegasus class, I've decided to do one more Pegasus related question and talk a little bit more about that crashed Pegasus. Before I go back to my quest to cover all of the model numbers. So the main question of the day comes to us from Mecha-san. Back in the 90s when the old Gundam Project website was up, I read that when the AU came to power, the Titans ended and decommissioned all of the Pegasus class ships for fear that the AU would use them as rallying symbols. I couldn't find this in any current sources. What do you think? True or false info? And now, first of all, I haven't personally heard about this theory before, but in a way, at the time, I feel like this could have potentially been true. Now, before Gundam 0083 came out, we went from Mobile Suit Gundam to Zeta Gundam, and suddenly all of the Pegasus class ships were gone. They just vanished into thin air. And keep in mind, Mobile Suit variations did exist at that time, so people back then were aware of several Pegasus class ships existing. And again, suddenly in 0087, they were gone. So I could see an older publication coming up with this theory to kind of explain why this happened. However, ever since the release of 0083, I feel like this theory has become less likely to be true. We get to see the fate of two Pegasuses quite clearly on screen when they were caught in the GPO-2's nuclear attack, and even the newly introduced Albion got pretty roughed up in her final battle, so it wouldn't be surprising if the Federation simply decided to scrap those three Pegasus classes that we saw in 0083 rather than repairing them. Especially considering the fact that immediately after Operation Stardust, the Titans began mass-producing the Alexandria and the Jim Quell, and the Earth Federation, well, they kind of had a fleet to rebuild, so rather than spending resources on those Pegasus classes, it seems that they spent all of their time and resources into upgrading Jims into Jim 2s and upgrading their Salamis into Salami Kais. And this then kind of leads into another theory as to why the Titans might not have wanted to use those old Pegasus classes that were still hanging around. And that is serviceability and repairability. They were mostly using Alexandria's and Salamis Kai classes, which had enough parts hanging around so that they could quickly repair them and push them back into service if they got damaged, if something went wrong, which might not have been the case with Pegasus classes, which were much more unique ships, and they might have had some design quirks that made them more difficult to repair as opposed to a mass-produced Salamis or a mass-produced Alexandria class. A second series then that seems to confirm that the Titans didn't just get those old Pegasus classes decommissioned, or at least not scrapped, is the return of Johnny Raiden manga, where we see the Blank Rival still alive and well. So what I personally think happened with the Pegasus classes is that off-screen they were actively used until the point where they would no longer be repairable, or, you know, in some cases just straight up destroyed. And I feel that this is definitely a sentiment that we see echoed in various video games. Think games like 0081, where the Thoroughbred was assigned to the Phantom Sweep Corps to hunt down Zeon remnants, or more obscure stuff like Return of Zeon. Here we see two Pegasus Kai class ships, the Il Nido and the Centaur, hunting down Zeon remnants in the African deserts all the way in UC 0090. Which is also around the time that the Return of Johnny Raiden manga takes place. So it's safe to say that there were still some Pegasus classes flying around. Now, another point that I also feel undermines that theory is that why would they be concerned about the Pegasus class becoming a symbol and not the Gundam? I would expect their fame or infamy, depending on how you look at it, would be rather linked. But they seem to be totally fine using the image of the Gundam as psychological warfare, especially especially when you look at Advance of Zeta, and they kept using the Gundam image for quite a long time, even after the AUG had stolen the Gundam Mark II and, well, had kind of turned the Gundam Mark II and subsequently the Zeta Gundam into one of their symbols. So, all things considered, I can see why someone back in the day would come up with a theory like that, but nowadays I feel like it has become much less likely for that theory to be true. And now for the second part of this question of the week, we return to the question of last week. What the hell is this ship that crashed into that mountain? Now, if you need to refresh your memory, there will be a link on screen and down below in the pinned comment and the description. And while I still can't say for certain which ship it is, I think we can exclude a few ones which it isn't. So, Mr. Flames commented with a very good point. If one of the two Pegasus-class ships from the Konpei Island Naval Review did indeed drift all the way to Earth and then did an atmospheric re-entry, the ship should have been way more damaged, which is a very good point. Like, you can see some impact damage, kind of like where the ship would have crashed into the mountain, but you don't really see any damage you would expect from a ship that did atmospheric re-entry. And then this comment also got me kind of thinking, because then I realized another thing. If this thing had gone through re-entry and fell all the way from atmosphere onto the mountain, there wouldn't have been a mountain left. It would have been a crater, and everything around it would have also been a crater. So this led me to the conclusion that if the ship was either the Grey Phantom or the Stallion, they must have repaired it after the nuclear attack and were then used again on Earth and then suffered an incident. Or the more likely explanation is the one that I went with in the original video. It's the Troy horse, and then, well, the stuff happened that I explained in that video. Or then a potential second explanation is that it is yet another ship of the same line that then had a incident that caused it to somehow end up in this mountain. An incident that does not include an atmospheric re-entry. Also, for the folks who still think that this thing is the Albion, look closely at the blue and yellow shields on the sides of the ships. You will see that on the Albion, they are behind the front legs and protrude quite a bit. However, with the Grey Phantom and its sister ships, these shields are part of the front legs and they hardly protrude at all. So now let's have a close look at the crashed ship. As you can see, the shields are part of the front legs and hardly protrude. So while there are many uncertainties about this ship, the one thing I can say for absolutely certain is that it is not the Albion. But that has been all for this episode, so I gotta go prepare myself to tackle the rest of the model numbers. As always, a big thank you to the Patreon supporters. I hope everyone watching has a great day, and I'll see you all next time.